April 11th, 2026, Islamabad, Pakistan. A city of over 1.3 million people, locked down completely. This is the third face-to-face round of direct negotiations in modern history between the United States and Iran. No hotline, no back-channel envoys shuttling between rooms. Two sworn enemies, for the first time in 47 years, sitting at the same table. And then Iran did something no one saw coming. The Iranian delegation walked in wearing all black, mourning clothes, for Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the officials who fell in the war. A message without words, a geopolitical performance calculated down to the last detail. The question on everyone's mind, is this a negotiating card or a final declaration of war? To understand what's happening in Islamabad today, we need to rewind exactly 43 days. February 28, 2026. Israel and the United States launched an air campaign against Iran, eliminating the supreme leader, multiple senior officials, and destroying key military and government targets. This wasn't a one-off airstrike. This was a calculated operation designed to gut the command structure of the Islamic Republic. Iran hit back, missiles and drones targeting Israel, American bases, and U.S. allied nations across the Middle East. And then they shut the door on the Strait of Hormuz, choking off global trade. The Strait of Hormuz, the jugular vein of roughly 1/5 of the world's oil and natural gas, slammed shut by Tehran as retaliation for the war America and Israel had started. Oil prices went through the roof. Stock markets buckled. Millions of families from Europe to Asia watched their electricity and gas bills explode overnight. That's when the geopolitical pressure hit a breaking point. On April 5th, Trump threatened to strike Iran's power grid and bridges if the strait wasn't reopened within 48 hours. This wasn't a routine warning. The odds of a ceasefire deal before Trump's deadline looked razor thin. Trump made it crystal clear. No deal by that deadline, and he'd order large-scale airstrikes on Iranian civilian infrastructure. And then Iran played a card that shocked the entire world. Instead of accepting Pakistan's proposed 45-day ceasefire, Iran rejected it and put forward its own 10-point peace plan. The plan included protocols to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, an end to all regional hostilities, the lifting of sanctions, and national reconstruction. This wasn't surrender. This was a bold diplomatic counterpunch. According to reporting from CNN and IRNA, Iran's state news agency, the plan called for regulated transit through the Strait of Hormuz, an end to attacks on Iran and its proxy forces across the region, a full U.S. military withdrawal from the Middle East, war reparations paid to Iran, the lifting of international sanctions and the unfreezing of Iranian assets, and a binding UN Security Council resolution to guarantee the peace deal. And here's the detail that set off a firestorm. In the Farsi version published by Iran's National Security Council, one clause stated that the U.S. had, in principle, committed to accepting Iran's right to enrich uranium. That same phrase was reportedly stripped from the English version. The Farsi text and the English text, different on one make-or-break point. Was this a translation error or a deliberate ambiguity play by Tehran? The conflicting U.S. and Iranian proposals are deepening the uncertainty around the already fragile 2-week ceasefire between the two sides. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pushed back immediately and stated flatly, "The president's red line, specifically that Iran must halt uranium enrichment on its own soil, has not changed. No wiggle room, no diplomatic hedging." Leavitt also stated that Iran's original 10-point proposal had been thrown in the trash by Trump's team, but that Tehran had since come back with a revised plan that was more reasonable and entirely different, one that might better align with America's own 15-point proposal. After 21 hours of marathon negotiations, through the night and into the morning, Vice President Vance announced the talks had ended without a peace deal, after Iran refused to commit to not pursuing nuclear weapons. At an early Sunday morning press conference at the Serena Hotel in Islamabad, Vice President JD Vance declared, "Iran had chosen not to accept our terms." He added, "The bad news is we didn't get a deal, and I think that's worse news for Iran than it is for the United States." If you want to understand the world not just through the surface-level headlines, but through why things happen, who's holding the cards, and what the next move is, this channel is where you need to be. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next deep dive analysis. Now, let's get into what really matters. While Vance was wheels up leaving Islamabad, the U.S. military wasn't standing still. The U.S. Navy announced that 2 destroyers had entered the Strait of Hormuz, for the first time since the war began, to conduct mine-clearing operations. It was a carefully calculated military signal. Washington isn't waiting for Tehran's permission to restore freedom of navigation in international waters. Iran's decision to close the Strait of Hormuz proved to be its single greatest strategic leverage point in this conflict. Under normal conditions, roughly 1/5 of the world's traded oil passes through that waterway, on more than 100 vessels every single day. But here's something a lot of people are missing. The United States is coming to these negotiations from a position of battlefield-tested strength. U.S. forces have been building up across the Middle East. American bases in the region are now home to roughly 50,000 troops, along with the largest air power deployment since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. According to Alex Vatanka, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, if Iran is serious about a lasting peace, they need to put real concessions on the table. Not just on the nuclear issue, but by showing a genuine willingness to normalize relations with the U.S. Vatanka called several of Iran's demands, such as a U.S. military withdrawal from the Middle East and war reparations, flat out unrealistic. Meanwhile, Vice President Vance confirmed the delegation is heading home without a deal, after Iran failed to commit to not pursuing nuclear weapons. Iranian media confirmed the collapse as well, with the semi-official Fars news agency reporting there are currently no plans for a new round of talks. At the core of this entire deadlock is one issue that refuses to bend: uranium. Vance put it plainly. What we need to see is a clear commitment that they will not pursue nuclear weapons, and that they will not pursue the tools that would allow them to quickly acquire nuclear weapons. This is the line in the sand the Western Democratic Alliance will not cross. Not out of hawkishness, but because history has shown us exactly what happens when a theocratic regime gets its hands on nuclear weapons. While Iran insists it isn't pursuing a bomb, it continues to demand its right to enrich uranium on its own terms. Tehran sees uranium enrichment as a matter of national sovereignty. The Trump administration and Israel see it as a non-starter, an absolute red line. At earlier talks in Geneva, Tehran only offered to pause uranium enrichment for 3 to 5 years, a window designed to outlast Trump's term in office. In other words, Iran wants to run out the clock, not give up the program. And here's what the analysts at the Soufan Center make clear. Experts assess that Trump cannot accept a deal that mirrors the 2015 JCPOA nuclear agreement, because the restrictions that deal placed on Iran's enrichment program were only ever temporary. But amid all these geopolitical chess moves, the 10-point plans, the 15-point counteroffers, the red lines, and the ultimatums, there are 93 million people in Iran waiting for an answer to the simplest question of all. Will I be able to live in peace tomorrow? Residents of Tehran told the AP they feel equal parts skeptical and hopeful after weeks of devastating airstrikes. Peace alone is not enough for our country, because we've been deeply wounded. The costs have been enormous, one 62-year-old man shared. So what happens next? 2 Pakistani officials say discussions between the 2 lead delegations will resume after a brief pause. Some technical staff from both sides are still in the room. The diplomatic machinery hasn't stopped, but the clock is ticking. Question now is, will these talks find some common ground? Or will they collapse and reignite a war that has already left a trail of destruction across the Middle East and Asia and triggered a global energy crisis unlike anything we've seen in modern history? One thing is certain: The United States has made its red lines unmistakably clear, what it's willing to give and what is absolutely off the table. And Iran has chosen not to accept those terms. The game isn't over, but the board is out in the open. Hit like and subscribe to Federal News if you want us to keep tracking this story closely. And drop a comment below. Do you think Iran will blink, or will the war come back? See you in the next one.